Hey, what's up? It's Jesko again from AcousticsInsider.com, where I teach home studio acoustic treatment techniques for audio professionals, but without all the voodoo. This is the second video in my series in collaboration with HEDD Audio. Welcome back. Just quickly, before I get started, if you're interested in a new speaker, if you're considering a new speaker and you are thinking about a HEDD speaker, have a look at the link in the description. If you buy through that link, you'll support me and you'll support HEDD Audio. And obviously, if you want to watch the rest of the videos in this series, have a look at the playlist in the card. So in this video, I want to talk about ported speakers, or rather what the port does, what the resonance system of the speaker does in combination with the room. Because a room like this has standing waves, has room modes. And all those room modes, those are resonances. Resonances have a decay associated with them, a kind of ringing. Here's what that looks like. But speakers, ported speakers, and the resonance system of ported speakers also have resonance and a decay and ringing associated with them. And here's what that looks like. So do those two add together? In particular, is the resonance, the decay of the speaker noticeable as part of the response of the room? Does a ported speaker make the decay, the low frequency decay of a room longer? That's what I want to find out in this video. And to do that, we're gonna go talk to Klaus Heinz in a second, the OG of air motion transformers, CTO of the company, and just a heavyweight in terms of speaker design. So as a first idea, how about we just measure it in the room and see what we can find? So let's start with the ported system, take a measurement. What we can then do with the Type 20 is close it off, create a closed system, and do another measurement and compare. Let's find out if the port is measurable in this room. So I've got the microphone set up roughly where the listening position is. We're gonna just measure the left speaker in its ported configuration. Okay, that's looking good so far. So here's the great thing. With the Type 20, we can just turn it into a closed speaker by inserting a specially prepared plug into the port and switching it into closed configuration. So let's do that now. So this is the plug, and all we have to do is make sure the screw is inserted and then use the screw handle to insert the plug into the port. Insert it nice and flush. There we go. And now we can remove the handle if we want to. With the plug inserted, all we have to do is turn it around, find the COP switch, closed or ported, and switch it to closed. All right, done. Let's turn the speaker back and take the second measurement. Switch up the colors so we can make it a bit more clear. And right now, there's a little difference, but it's pretty hard to see. So if anything, we can see a difference here in the low end, obviously, where the port actually does some work. So let me just zoom in on this part right here by clicking the 10 to 200 Hertz button. And what we can see now is that in the ported version, that's the green line, we have to seem to have some slightly higher peaks around the kind of 40 to 50 Hertz marks, but then it kind of reduces at 30 Hertz. And we're seeing a slightly lower volume at the 80 Hertz mark. As is, this doesn't really tell us much. If we didn't know that this was, one of these versions was closed and one was ported, all we'd be able to tell is that these are slightly differently tuned speakers, really. Of course, knowing what a ported versus closed speaker does, we can be slightly more specific about what we're seeing. And so what I'm going to do first of all is apply a much more drastic smoothing to show you guys what's going on. So we're going to take it all the way to 1 octave smoothing. And I'm also going to increase the visual range back to full spectrum 20 to 20 kilohertz. So what we can see now is that we have a slightly higher energy in the ported version compared to the closed version at around sort of 40, 50, 60 hertz. But then as we go down in frequency even further, down to about 30 hertz, the closed version actually has more energy. And this is purely because a ported speaker has a roll-off in the low frequencies of around 24 dB per octave, and a closed speaker has a roll-off of around 12 dB. So in a way, using a ported speaker is kind of like applying a low cut or a high pass filter. It's basically a steeper curve in its decay, if you will. Yeah? And for that reason, we're seeing slightly more energy in the ported version at the higher bass frequencies, where the resonant port actually pushes the energy, but then it tails off, it drops off much faster after that. And in comparison, the closed version actually delivers more energy at lower frequencies. So that's the difference we can see in the frequency response. Of course, what we're interested in is, does it add to the decay of the room? Does it show up in the room? So this is the waterfall plot in this room for the closed version. So just as a reminder, the waterfall plot basically shows us the frequency response. That's the top of this ridge line, if you will. But then we have a third dimension. We've got time coming at us. And in particular, we see these resonances in the lowest frequencies. Those are the standing waves in this room. Again, I'm going to zoom in using this 10 to 200 hertz button at the bottom. So now we're really seeing those mountain ridges, if you will, that represent the standing waves or room modes in this room. They are cut off at the front of the image because we're only looking at about 300 milliseconds of time from when the sound starts. But so again, this is the closed version, and here is the ported version. Obviously, we're seeing slight differences due to the fact that the frequency response is different. So the ported version starts off at a higher level in regard to these standing waves, but just by estimating how quickly those drop off, we're not really seeing much difference. Yeah? At least here, we can't really see the port or the decay of the port resonance, the port speaker resonance system doing anything. Yeah? I was sort of expecting this. Yeah? The resonance decay of the port is much, much smaller than the decay time of standing waves. Standing waves often have decay times of a second maybe for a decay of 60 dB. It's definitely possible. But the decay of the port is much, much shorter, at around somewhere between 30 to 50 milliseconds maybe. So it doesn't really show up here. So why is this so hard to measure? And is there a way to actually measure it? How did those graphs that I showed you in the intro actually get created? Shout out to Mike Senior of Sound and Sound, by the way. The great thing is we're at HEDD Audio and we can talk to Klaus Heinz, the OG of air motion transformers, but also just someone with a huge legacy of speaker designs and just more experience with speakers than anybody I really know. So let's go talk to him and find out what the deal is with these ports on speakers. I think he might be in here. Dear Klaus.
You're right.
Can we borrow you for a minute?
Yeah, it'll be expensive, but...
Perfect. Let's go.
Hello.
Dear Klaus, thanks for joining me. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk more about your experience as well in another video. Right now, I really like to get your opinion, your expertise on one particular point. We saw in the other room that it is pretty much impossible to measure the response of the resonant system of the port and how it contributes to the response of the room, at least in that kind of setup.
Yeah.
So as a speaker designer, how do you make sure that the port is doing what you want it to do?
To be more accurate starts as an effort on the computer, because there are quite some softwares that can simulate what is to expect. So one really starts with the computer, and one gets the speaker under consideration. One gets its small parameters, and then you can choose which reflex tube you would like to choose, how long, how thick, or what kind of diameter you have.
Sure.
And then you absolutely can preview the result that you will have. The result that you get would correspond to a near-field measurements, meaning that the microphone is like 2 centimeters away from the bass reflex tube, and that eliminates or avoids the contributions from the room acoustics that always would totally distort or make wrong results. It's a nice and a cheap trick, so to say.
Yeah. Let's talk more about what the actual response of the tube is as part of the resonant system.
Yeah.
We have obviously a resonant frequency when we're talking about the frequency spectrum, and when we're talking about time, we have a decay that gets introduced depending on how it's tuned and damped, correct? Yeah. Can you talk a bit more about the time aspect of the resonant system, depending on how you tune the port and how you choose to integrate that into the speaker design?
Yeah. A port is a resonator. It means he is a problem.
Right.
We would like to have a flat response without resonances, but we do like the additional bass response we get out of this resonator or bass reflex port. The theoretical ideal is to have a speaker that is not resonant, needing its time to calm down, and a slow, stuffed speaker that needs a time to come up, then has no resonance but is too slow.
Right.
Something closed loudspeakers are often blamed for.
Right.
Least, yeah. So, and the ideal thing that is as fast as it should be without resonating is called the aperiodic solution in between. That's the ideal step that you would like to see in a speaker. And this ideal principally is not possible with bass reflex tubes because they have their own time life, if respecting your question. Yeah. So there is a normal movement from the cone, and the air from the bass reflex support is much quicker. You have a velocity transformation between cone and bass reflex port, though nothing is in order, and the ground-taking equations to calculate all that are overemphasized or over asked.
As in like
they can't answer.
We're putting too much
really
weight
calculate it because of the different velocities. So the exact answer in the real sense is not possible, but there are experiences that lead to the more practical results.
So in practice, within this very small range of options that we have, how much do those options affect the actual decay time of the resonant system? Does it, first of all, in what, like ballpark, how long is the typical decay of the resonant system for the ported speaker?
That can exceed 100 milliseconds or be in very bad loudspeakers half a second, but it's a typical 2-digit millisecond number and maybe a little bit 3-digit number.
Is this something that you actually pay careful attention to? Is this a parameter that you want to control in itself? Or is the decay time of the system rather a result of just getting the entire system tuned correctly? How much attention do you actually pay to that decay time, if at all?
No. I paid much attention to it years before, but it really gets more normal, and the attention goes more to the quality of the woofer, and there it goes especially to the nonlinear area of the woofer. You always have a voice call that in certain areas is totally within the magnetic field, and then if it comes nearer to the end, you have nonlinearities there. But the most important thing are those spiders, or the central spider as it's called, the lower connection between the cone and the basket.
Right.
So if more and more amplitude is required, the less the speaker really is capable of doing it, the more interesting gets this non-linear area between still linear and coming near to the end of the whole movement.
The excursion range.
And you can do very different things there. You can succeed and you can make real bad loudspeakers in that area. So they, for the bass response, for what you hear from the lower frequency, that plays a vital role. That's what I can say. Whereas the other things are predictable, more predictable. The linear things and what happens in the tube is more predictable.
So obviously the entire solution to this problem is to just build a closed cabinet, which you obviously did with the entire new type series. Let's call them the new HEDD series. Explain to us why did you choose to pursue a speaker design that allows both closed and ported functionality?
There's a clear story for it.
Please.
Because all the speakers we made, and I designed speakers since decades, were open, just to get the bass and the transients smacky.
That's an oomph.
Everybody who has listened to double 15 inches with big bass reflex tubes in a studio is intrinsicated or is
brainwashed in a way.
Touched. This is rather impressive. And on the other side, I thought to make a clean speaker is a kind of different task. But closed speakers have the image not to be very powerful, and the efficiency is lower, and the -3 dB point for the bass frequency is higher, and so they are boring insofar for many people. And I made boring or experiences insofar as well, so it was rather late when I thought it is the better system from theory, clearly. But the power is missing. So as we can't change this theory, we changed the power. You can see we made a very big speaker, which has all in all 4 9-inch woofers with 2.4 kilowatts, closed, and that is no lack of power. That's what I like to say. And when we experienced the rest of the speaker, which has the same drive unit, so it was not a totally different sound, and it actually sounded better. And after some time, we compared it to our classical bass reflex tube things, and it was so surprising to see mid-range on a different level, which we did not realize by listening to it alone, but by comparing it with a well-known Type 20, Type 30 we had, that I thought, how can we combine these two things? If somebody is ready to leave off a few dBs in bass, then we have the better solution. And as we work with DSPs, meanwhile, we could make the same -3 dB point on cost of a maximum amplitude. And you do not need a string quartet amateur or something like that to still like it, because there is bass and it is more exact. The main virtue, the main advantage I see, there is a lack of coloration that goes up to the mid-range, because the other air is just not there. It's a poem. That led to the chance to have both things working in the Mark II series, and it was possible, of course, with the DSP, that we have different filters applied, whether the plug is in or not. And it was an additional task to have a linear phase for both cases. We in the new series we have linear phase down to 60 Hertz and below. And to combine this phase linearity, which adds another kind of clarity, which enough customers have really agreed to in the meantime.
We talked about that in the last video, by the way, so check that out.
To combine phase linearity with a choice of reflex port or closed operation is an interesting combination, which gives the choice and has the clarity that you want to, on cost of a few dBs in the lower bass.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's head to the testing room and see if we can get a much cleaner measurement than we could get in our little studio.
Klaus. Okay.
Vielen Dank dir.
Bis dann einmal,
So we're back in the studio for now. Basically, what we try to do is measure the port resonance at a very close proximity. So with the microphone, maybe somewhere between 2 to 8 centimeters away from the actual opening of the port. So that's maybe 1 to 3 inches about. And it turns out that it's surprisingly difficult, still under that close proximity, to show you guys the resonance, the decay of the port. The idea is with this close proximity is that the room doesn't matter. So we tried it in the testing room, we tried it in here. I even tried it with the speaker on the floor and the microphone on the floor. That's another technique that sound system designers use to get more accurate measurements. But none of them really show us exactly what the decay of the port looks like, unfortunately. That's how hard it is to capture this data. You really need a testing laboratory that is certified down to frequencies of 30 hertz, and those are rare if they even exist at all. So I still want to show you what results we got and kind of walk you through them so you have an idea of just how difficult this is. So the first measurement that I want to show you is the close proximity measurement of the port in the testing room. So what we're looking at here is again a waterfall plot from 10 to 200 hertz. And you might think, okay, that looks pretty great. Apart from obviously this ridge down here coming at us. It's almost at the tuning frequency of the port, around 43 hertz. But we're looking at a time segment here that is 2 seconds long. And from this, it might seem that the resonant behavior, the decay time of this port is 1.5 seconds long. Obviously, that can't even remotely be true. And the way to confirm that is to do the same type of measurement in another room. So we came over to the studio that we're in now, and here's what that looks like. So now we've got multiple ridges here. Clearly, the room is still contributing. These are actually the standing waves of the room, and we can confirm that by just going back to the standard measurement we took at the sweet spot. So that's this one here, and we can see that we've got the exact same resonances, just with higher level and longer times. But even at 8 centimeters from the port, we can still see those standing waves contributing, and this is with a time window of 500 milliseconds. So before we're looking at 2 seconds, now we're looking at half a second, and they're still being cut off. So clearly this isn't the decay time of the resonant system of the speaker. This is still the room taking over. That's how hard it is to capture this data. And in fact, what we saw before, so that ridge coming at us that was about 2 seconds long from the measurement that we took in the testing room, it turns out that was some sort of hum generated by my interface and laptop combination. So at those kind of very, very high sensitivities, very high input gain with very low output volume, the system actually generates a hum that was too loud to reveal the decay time of the port. We tried a bunch of things to narrow it down to figure out that that was actually the issue. So different speakers, different microphone, different cables, and they all revealed the same thing. So in the end, we plugged headphones into the interface and just turned on direct monitoring, cranked it all the way up, and then it was clear there was a hum in there that was generated by the system, right? So you really need not just a laboratory, but you also need measurement systems that are low enough in self-noise, are clean enough to reveal these types of effects. So where does that leave us? Well, it's pretty clear that the decay time of the port is so short that it makes it almost impossible to measure it under any reasonable circumstances in any of the means that I have, at least. Does it contribute to the decay time of the room? Well, a tiny amount, to the extent that it exists, right? And so with a decay time of maybe somewhere between 20 up to perhaps 100 milliseconds, as Klaus Heinz said, that's the amount that it can contribute to the overall response of the room. So in the grand scheme of things, does it make a difference? Yes, but tiny. Is it important? Not more than that, I guess. One thing that Klaus mentioned to me, again off camera, and he hinted at in our talk before, if the port is tuned correctly, the effect on the frequency response is way more important than the effect of any added decay time. If done right, that decay time is going to be minimized anyway, and so it's more of an afterthought when actually designing the speaker. Of course, the perception of a closed versus a ported speaker is very, very different, even with such a minute time aspect to this whole question. But it's a very audible difference, and people who really want the most accurate response from their speakers will tend to a closed speaker. And of course, if you want to find this out for yourself, you can simply get a HEDD MK2 type speaker and experiment yourself with closed versus ported functionality and see what works best for you. Just to finish up, a reminder that I've got a brand new video workshop for you. This is the Phantom Speaker Test, how to correctly set up your speakers no matter what room you're in, because I know in our home studios we're often facing difficult circumstances, odd-shaped rooms, windows and doors placed in difficult positions, and the first question that usually pops up when you're setting up a studio in a new room is, where do I place my setup? Do I place it facing this wall, facing that wall? What about all these thumb rules about facing the short side, setting up at 38% of the length of the room? I go into detail about all these questions and give you step-by-step instructions how to correctly place your listening position and set up your speakers in your room to optimize for a better low-end balance, a good low-end balance, and a proper pattern of reflections in order to get a sound that really sounds like you're working on headphones. So again, if you are setting up your speakers, if you are setting up a new studio and you need to figure out how to exactly place your speakers in your room, make sure you sign up to my free Phantom Speaker Test workshop at the link in the description. And with that, let's finish this video. I hope you learned something. I definitely learned a ton. I knew in general what this topic was about, what the answer to this question was, but just pursuing these steps again showed me how tricky it is to really classify what's going on in the very, very deep low end in our studios, and obviously how that impacts both speakers and the room. With that, let's keep learning to trust our ears, get back to having fun making music in the studio, and I'll see you in the next video.